our Kaumatua Greg Tortor speaks. We're going to be running a PowerPoint presentation on the state of the awa, which you have copies of. It will be rolled over as a PowerPoint as he's speaking.
Oh, thank you. And
we've
got that.
You have them. These images were taken by Trish Nuku over yonder, who voyages the banks of the river on a daily basis. This is her way of speaking to this forum. Thank you.
Thank you.
Please pay particular attention to the captions, which are 2 or 3 worded. Now we'll hand it over to Greg Tortor.
Kia ora koutou, tepu, ko Greg Tortor toku ingoa. Ko o uero te maunga, ko Ngaruroro te awa.
These are my tribal
Ko
affiliations.
Ngāti Kahununu te iwi. Ko hene manu ngai te opoku iri, toku hapu.
These are my sub-tribes.
Ko take te mu te waka. Ko
This is a
kahukura
canoe.
nui, whare tipuna. Ko rua tapu wahine, whare kai, ko o mahu.
The dining
Whenua.
hall in my ancestral lands.
Ko tōku pāpā ko Mataura
My
Pirika
father
Tōtoa.
is
Ngāti hene manu,
of Ngāti
ki o
Hinemanu
mahu.
in Omahu.
Tōku māma,
My mother,
tangi matua hohepa, ki hene pare, ki te hara tō, tuwhare tō. No reira tēnā koutou, tēnā,
thank you
tēnā
all.
koutou katoa. I was asked to come and talk, and being an ex-military man, I like to be prepared, but it was put on me by the hop, so I don't really want to go on and on and on and take up too much of your people's time. But what I do want to do is just give my time before I went in the army. When I was a child brought up in Omahu, we were only something like 200 metres away from the awa. That's where we lived, all of us people that live on this table. And we, back then, in the 60s, the Ngaruroro was running riot. It had plenty of water. We could swim anywhere. We could catch eels anywhere. We could catch inangas anywhere. And we could catch kaura and all that. It was plentiful. We stayed there all day, and we got as black as we wanted to be because we loved the river. We lived on it. It was ours. So I could say that our tipuna were the same because of the pastimes that my rangatira here has spoken about. And that was when I was a kid being brought up there. And all of us from Omahu, that's what we did. I go to today, and I speak of today right now, in this point in time. This may be a once upon a time story because she's that bad now and that low because of what's happening, whether I accuse the so-called people like farmers that are sucking it dry for their use, and the biggest sucker is the guy Glazebrook up the road, and I'll say that because I don't care. You know, the Pareware and the Pare Tuia, the Awanui streams, they are all dry. It might not be too long because they end up at the Karamu and then run into the Ngaruroro. The Ngaruroro could be a once upon a time story like these ones, dry as. And I say that because in the last 5 years, I've done nothing but walk that river with my dog in order to keep me fit and walking up and down there. I'm 71. This fella here said he's nearly 80. This is my kaumatua, rangatira. What he said today, I'll back it all the way to the Bank of New Zealand. Because there is no one in Omahu that has said what he said today that is quantified to talk what he has said. He speaks what I believe is tika. And I say that because he was mischief. When he got into trouble and he got home, his grandfather said to him, "He wero, kei te pēhea koe." He go, "Oh, good grandpa." His grandmother would say to him, "He wero, it's the Pākehā in you, that's why." So you can understand why he said he was mischief. And I like walking with this fella because he tells me some good stories. Now, one of the stories he told me was at Whanawhana where he told you that I went up onto. He woke up one morning not realising that whanawhana was the parsite, but his hair stood up on him like this. So he grabbed his rifle, and he thought, someone's coming to get me. But then he started walking a bit further, and then his hair come down, so he said, I must be all right. Very tutu fella, went all over the place, and he's told me all these fantastic stories. So I want to, I only say this, is that what he has said to you is tika tonu, and it's fantastic. The stories that I've heard this fella tell, and I've been on a lot of hikois with this man, and he's told me a lot. We've recorded him a lot. We've also GPS all the parsites, which is one day, as an ex-army service personnel, I hope to be the one to tell our people the corridor from the beginning to the end of when we finish this thing. But all these parsites, like he says, they're on the Ngaruroro River. So I back him up in saying that Ngāti Hinumanu Ngāti Opakiri, the awa of Ngaruroro, that's ours. That's Hinumanu's, o Mahu. Now I want to talk just a wee bit about my army life. I've done 24 years in the army. I started in 1970. I was mischief like Wero. No one could tell me what to do. Even the army used to lock me up now and again, but that's just part of life. But I want to talk about the time when the army sent me from Waihuru all the way through this side of our land. During that era, I didn't have a clue where I was, except that I could read a map and I knew I had to do a job because the military said, you go there. I'm standing on the hill saying, what the F and hell am I doing here? But I was being paid for it, so I had to shut up. And little did I realise I was walking over my own whenua. And I walked for miles, right down. I get to the place where the new bridge has been built now, and see, Kuripapango. I get to Kuripapango. We had to go down and cross the Ngaruroro River there, because this was known as an escape and evasion course, and we had to chase these people. And you can imagine climbing up and down those ranges up there. It was hell, to say the least. But anyway, we were young, you know, bulletproof, everything, and we could do it. But anyway, that's my score. Is that I did all that walking and followed the Ngaruroro River all the way down without knowing that was my own whenua. Until I retired, and my brother, who I wish was here now, but he's not, he's a very good friend of this man here, he started telling me, hey boy, you better listen to this. I said to him, no, I don't want to. But it wasn't until he died that I regret not listening to him and understanding all our stories about our tipuna and all our land things that are going on today. And today, I think I'm more knowledgeable through this rangatira here. So I'll end on that with saying this. His name is Lakai Wero here, Ua Tani Whakarana. And, you know, people that he's met call him Wero. And I thought, how abusive can these pricks be when they can't even pronounce a name like Wero properly? Wero, Lakai Wero here, Ua Tani Whakarana, who was named after his great tipuna. Well, that's the great man that I think that, you know, there's no one that I know that's walked all over that land like he has. He was, I might say, mischief, and but he was not a crook in going on that land, because he had an understanding that somewhere in this world of his, he was related to the land. That's why he did what he did, and he was a deer hunter to a lot of people, and he was enemies and friends to a lot of people. But today, I don't care what anyone says, I'll stand by my rangatira, kaumātua, anyway. So, nō reira te tepu, tēnā koutou,
To the table, thank you all.
Also, we've got one question from Dr. Brett.
Kia ora. And you might excuse my pronunciation as well. But Ohiwea Stream, where does that enter the Ngaruroro, please?
Which one?
Ohiwea?
Ohiwea.
Yes.
Ohiwea, it's actually, it's at Omahu, but just further up, about a kilometre up, it's in a place called Potaka. And it actually, Oh,
So it's on the Mahu side of the river. It enters on the north bank.
yes,
From the north bank.
yes.
And is that stream spring fed?
I can't say I didn't follow it. I've never followed it all the way back, but I know that the water temperature is totally different. So I would say because it's a lot colder.
Yeah.
Or here we are, whatever.
Can I answer that?
Kia ora.
That stream or Hiuia is fed by Kotuku, a swamp at Runanga.
Back towards Swamp Road.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Not on Swamp Road.
But to the west of Swamp Road. Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. So, Mr. Toto, just another question for you. You talked about you used to catch eels and fish and other things, and I wasn't going to ask how old you were, and you did that for me. I was just wondering what sort of time period you were last catching eels and fish.
I left for the army in 1970, so I was 20 years old then. But from the time I was, I went to school in Omahu in 1956. From then, right through to the time I left, we were able to catch eels. I might like to add that she mentioned a lady, Keita Kahureremo. That's my mother-in-law. My father-in-law was a great user of the river. He used to walk down there with his hinaki and just drop it on the edge and come home with us a feed of tuna every time. So for my at least 15 years of my time, we did that all the time. Sometimes it stopped us from getting a bit of a boot up the backside for being out all day, so we would try and catch some tuna to take home to satisfy our parents for our longevity and staying in the river. Yeah.
Thank you. We'll continue. Have we got some more speakers? Okay. No, that was fine, thanks. Yeah.
Tēnā koutou. Apologies, I'll read just so I can be a bit more methodical. Tēnā koutou, ko Beverley Te Huia Ellison aho,
This is
no
my name.
Pakipaki aho.
And I am from Pakipaki.
I work as a public health strategist at Kahungunu Health Services, specialising in community health. I have the following qualifications and experience relevant to my evidence.
We'll take those as read.
Ka pai. Ka pai. I was just going to read the whole thing. Ka pai?
You could start from 4 if that's okay.
Yes. Yes.
Because we were being reading and listening. We're doing
Nice.
pretty good on multitasking.
Thank you. So I'm here today to talk about water poverty. So water poverty is a term used to describe a situation where a nation or region cannot afford the cost of sustainable clean water to all people at all times. The implications are devastating. Water and its relevance to health outcomes is not new. In fact, providing safe drinking water and adequate sanitation services to all people is perhaps the single most important public health concept. Unfortunately, it is not fail-proof, and according to the World Health Organization, it is the greatest development failure of the 20th century. This is because nations and regions are guilty of not prioritising the drinking water and adequate sanitation of all people. The most shameful consequences and failure is the high rates of mortality among young children from preventable water-related illnesses. If no action is taken to address unmet basic human access and need for water, people will suffer and will die these preventable diseases. This problem is one of the most serious public health crises facing us here in Heretaunga today and deserves far more attention and resources than it's currently getting. Locally, regional disputes over water security, water scarcity and contamination, unsustainability and ecological degradation, and the threat of climate change and population growth are complex and political. At the heart of this problem, however, is the failure to provide even the most basic water services to all of our Hawke's Bay and Kahungunu iwi population, at devastating human health problems associated with the failure. The Hawke's Bay Regional Council, along with other government agencies, are charged with monitoring access to water and sanitation. While there is some information and completed assessments, like the state of the environment of their 5-yearly plan, they offer only a partial picture at best. Access to adequate data, information and narratives from different groups of people and their different localities, more specifically Māori communities and their populations, are completely missing. Therefore, it is difficult under the current methodology used to draw any conclusive trends or outcomes to any health predictors. At the same time, despite problems with data and its evidence, and while progress has been made in providing water services to some regions and some areas, limited resources and rapidly growing populations make it difficult to provide an adequate trajectory. The most serious consequence of this failure is widespread water-related diseases that ultimately end up in death. Since many of these issues and diseases are not examined and unpacked, the true extent of this disease is actually unknown. Water-related diseases are typically placed in 4 classes. Waterborne disease, caused by ingestion of water, which we saw in Havelock. Water wash disease, caused by poor personal hygiene or lack of clean water for sanitation purposes. Water-based disease, caused by parasites found from organisms. And water-related diseases caused by other insects. If we are to include a Te Ao Māori model of health, as acknowledged by the New Zealand Ministry of Health, it would also include water identity, caused by a disconnection to Waimaori through loss of supply or contamination of source, resulting in mental and wairua disconnection and degradation of the general well-being. Over the past 5 years, I have personally witnessed, as a clinician in our community, increase in water-related diseases within our Māori communities. 3 months ago, I requested information from the Hawke's Bay Regional Council regarding admissions into the Hawke's Bay Hospital due to water-related diseases. I have only had the time to examine cellulitis and intestinal infectious diseases. In my first evaluation, however, the data and information it cannot be used as evidence today to conclusively identify that some Hawke's Bay areas have less access to water supply than others. However, we cannot rule it out. What the data is showing is that small Māori communities are more likely to be admitted to hospital with cellulitis and intestinal infections. And that has consequently been the case for more than 6 years, either due to environmental, social, or water poverty. Māori health is suffering, and until we are sure that Māori communities have access to clean water, which is meaningful and in line with Māori values of water and health, prioritising other ways in which to use water should not be done. Therefore, I suggest changes to TANC and the MRA do not prioritise health, especially the health of Māori and their communities. The simplest estimate of future illness for water-related diseases comes from assuming that proportion of illness to total population experienced. A more sophisticated approach calculates water-related illness as a proportion of population without access to clean, meaningful supplies of water, rather than as a proportion of the total population. This is also more realistic, since water-related illness primarily occurs within the subset of a population and a closer reflection of our current Māori health situation. While the submission cannot conclusively provide evidence, it cannot conclusively exclude the relevance and direct relationship this issue of water poverty has on the outcome of Māori health. It is therefore my professional opinion that until more evidence, research and information regarding the pressing and important issues of water-related health outcomes is explored, changes to the status quo is not permitted. In fact, there is obvious evidence to suggest that there is an already over-allocation of water and that the health of Māori population is taking a back seat to what is now new introduced policies by the Hawke's Bay Regional Council. In my conclusion, where water is plenty, people live longer. Māori die 8 years younger than non-Māori. Is this an accident or is this by design? The Hawke's Bay Regional Council would like you to think that their science has adequate evidence to say it's by design. Therefore, however, this design lacks full narratives and Māori knowledge or Indigenous science, which is having the detrimental effects on what we are seeing today in Māori health. I sit here today to provide a voice for Māori who are too unwell to be here, who have been told by their doctors to accept their lot, but wonder why it only happens to them. I urge you, before any changes are made, we exercise good evidence base, which includes Māori knowledge. Kia ora.
Thank you. We'll see if we've got any questions. Thank you very much for that. That was quite a thoughtful piece. And certainly, you're preparing this in your professional capacity.
Yes.
I just had it's more of a clarification in terms of the data that you're relying on. Is the data you're relying on generically different than the data that the Regional Council relies on?
It's not asked of. The philosophical difference of Māori health to Western health, your line of inquiry is therefore different. So if nobody is looking, then we are not finding. So if, this information has never been asked for. I'm the first person who's asked for it.
Thank you. Ms. Winipere?
Penultimate.
Kia ora koutou katoa. Ngā mihi.
Greetings to all.
Whenua o Kahanunu.
To the home people
I humbly
of
thank the people of
Ngāti
Omahu
Kahungunu,
who have whāngaid me and Kahanunu, who have most graciously taken me under their wing. And I'm here to tautoko the cause today.
who support.
It was a last minute decision. I had a dream last night and I woke up really angry. And I speak from the heart. Whakakarakia, nā ka o mātou kai tahu wahine toa. I
The
call on them
strength
to speak on
of
behalf.
Ngāi Tahu woman.
I have lived here since the 1980s and I consider Hiritonga my kainga. O Joanne Freeman, taku ingoa. Taku mama, Jacqueline Young o Kaitahu me Ngāti Wiwi. Taku papa, Christopher Young o Ramani Hirahipi. Nā tipu haere matakite iwi o te awe. Whāngai o Mahu. Taku mahu, taku mahi, nākau tinana, wairoa waiora. Historically, trained in mental health, university, trained in psychology, postgraduate in understanding systems and culture and the metaphor of nature, how that applies to organisations and the patterns that occur. I have a range of experience in local and central government, working at ministerial level as an advisor to Sir Peter Tapsell, Tākata Pita, who has since passed. I travelled throughout the Motu understanding and consulting with iwi in my past. And now I also have a private practice in Ngākau Tinana Waiora, Wairua Waiora, and consulted various organisations such as the Hillary Commission, New Zealand Medical Council, the Veterans Affairs, to name a few. But most of all, I'm here for my tangata Waiora, my patients who come to see me. And I speak on their behalf. I speak for the people that I have to serve as a mental health practitioner. I also am under the guidance of a tōhanga Wiramu a tōhanga o Wairoa, of ancient practices of Te Ao Māori, and also psychiatrist Dr. Alistair Bush, who has written in most interesting research on the integrative practice of Te Ao Māori me Te Ao Pākehā psychiatry. So part of that practice of my learning is to integrate whakarāranga, whakawaioro, Te Ao Māori, me Te Ao Pākehā, how to integrate that within my practice. The people of Kahanunu are my tangata waiora who I serve, and I see in my practice the flow-on effects of the loss of the wai. Interestingly enough, in Māori, the healing kupu is wairua, spiritual, waiora, well-being, waioranga, healing power. And you take away the wai, then you take away the essence of the people, the healing power of the people, the essence that allows us to heal. Our lovely Kui was talking about the fact that the water is a baptismal, a sacred wahitapu, and now it's dirty and dried up. So you take away that wairua, the essence of the cleansing of the water. You take away the Māori, the life force, the ihi, the kaha, the waiora. You take away the essence of the people when you do such things. And I see that flow-on effect. I see through dreams, karukaru and her pain and her mamai, because her kauhanga is filthy. Her swimming hole that children see as they play is paru. So I see violation of tapu through my patients, intergenerational trauma because of the loss of the whenua, the land, the rongoa, the healing power of the water. I can't take them to the water to heal them because it's dirty. I can't immerse them in the water because it's filthy. That loss resonates through the people. How can you let this happen? I'm disturbed because of the fact that at a mana event like this, the higher echelon, the rangatira of the Hawke's Bay Regional Council, turned up for the pōwhiri and the kapati, but they're not here to hear the true mamai of the people. They turn their tail when things get rough and leave it to the front line. Our rangatira and a wahine tō or kaitahu who stand and fight beside the men, that the rangatira would be there at the front line. Where are your managers? Where are the counsellors to hear the mamai and sense the pain? I see one of them here. Where are the rest? When the going gets hard and the patu comes out and the verbal kōrero, the truth, the pono, the tika of the word comes out, they turn tail. They need to feel kanohi, kaite, kanohi, the pain and the mamai, and they need to be here to listen, to endorse the mana of this event. Maybe you need to give them a call in your break and ask, where are you? Why aren't you here? Because it's the ones up the top there that make the final decisions of what the information that you've given them. I've worked in local government, I know how the system works. Don't pull the wool over our eyes. So may I suggest once again that you give your managers and counsellors a reminder that when there's hui of such a nature of this, that they turn up and they listen and they come to the people. They come to the tangata whenua. They come to the kāinga of the tangata whenua, and they hear straight from the people the pain and experience of this intergenerational trauma that I have to heal through my mahi. They need to hear straight from those who are affected and afflicted by this cultural and environmental disaster that has occurred. The violation of tapu. That's what it is, a violation of tapu. And when you violate tapu in Te Ao Māori, then the flow-on effect is huge. And you can see that through the statistics of people like Bev, the mental health statistics, the suicide rate. I walk into the psychiatric unit and I see people who are suffering, more Māori incarcerated through Section 8, more Māori police call-outs to be incarcerated because of a violation of tapu. And the violations of tapu is because you don't have true kaitiakitanga over te wai, over ngā wai. This is a cultural and environmental disaster. Those powers that be need to hear and see. If we have meetings like this on a marae again, I suggest that they need to turn up and not just turn around when the going gets tough and the bullets start firing and the patu comes out. This is a cultural tragedy and a loss of mana. Ngā mihi nui, I hope you take up my challenge to pass that message on, because I'm interested to hear what the response is. Are you hearing me? Whakarongo? Ka pai. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for your question to whakamaramatanga te. Please, take this on. It can't go on like this. The flow-on effect is huge. You know, this is not just about, as I've alluded to, the tears, the roimata or karukaru, is not just about here and now. I challenge you, what is the legacy as a commissioner organisation like yours that you wish to leave for the mokopuna, the uri, the ones that come after? Because it's your chance to turn this around and make good. This is your chance to turn around and make good too. Ngā mihi.
I don't think we have any questions. We didn't have any further questions. That was the...
I te tepu, you have my
Thank you to the table.
response here.
Yes.
I won't read it all.
I've taken the opportunity to read it while you were on
Okay.
little breaks as well, and the other members have already gone over it. So if perhaps there was just a few important points you wanted to make.
Well, we've been, the important point is, since submissions were first asked for, ngā kaitiaki o te awa Ngāriroro have been meeting on a weekly basis, sometimes for half a day, sometimes for a whole day, with the occasional week that we've skipped. So, you know, there is stuff in here which I'd love our people to hear, not just the privy of the people that we are in this. So it's just written for the people, for your ears. And so I understand we're running short of time. I was going to mihi to the haukainga, and I've listed all your hapu. Thank you. Yes. And also to, most importantly, ka rewiriwa, you know, Tino Pody, you know, she can't even cry, there's no tears in the stream next door. You can go during your break, you don't have to wait for the site visit. So a key point from our people of Ngā Kaitiaki o te awa a Ngāriroro, from the source to the sea, including the estuary and the entire ecology that occurs there. It's a pivotal part of any change between fresh and saltwater estuarine environments. So our kaitiaki-tangi function, of course, embraces the estuaries as well. And then thenceforth into the mighty Wainanui-a-Kiwa. Right? Significant contributor. So I didn't actually write that, but it's come to me. So to mea tuatahi, what a justice, is the voice of our people from Ngā Kaitiaki o te awa a Ngāriroro. Wai has its own essence and Māori. That's our opening statement. Our closing statement And there's quite a bit in here if people wanted to view it, but as we were told in no uncertain terms that ngā kaiti aki o te awa a Ngariroro, and I've been sent here to leave this message with you, to seek governance complete with resourcing to fulfil our obligations to the taonga tuku iho associated with intact, thriving Ngariroro moko tuararo ki rangatira. We acknowledge our tākatoa wai, and I've just been whispered, read it out. Do you think? There was a bit in here about intimidation. You might have noticed that the governors, of our region haven't found a way to treat Māori internally and externally to their organisation as equals. Some people have lost their jobs. That's called intimidation and bullying. And there is not the wherewithal within the organisation to address such matters. That's got to change. It's a organisational structural remake. And I also needed to assure the whānau that as a member of the Tank Group, 5 of the 6 years, that I repeatedly asked the hui that were held monthly, bi-monthly, to be held at our marae. So this whakawhiti kōrero, that our people knew what was happening, that they could anticipate manuhiri, that we could gear up our psyche to invite people into our midst, and we could practice what you've heard today, our memories. Mai rano. We actually say we're pre-waka people, and then of course we have migration waves, and we're those people too. That's okay. That's how it is. But so when the function like such as this does not occur on a marae, then you're losing like hundreds and thousands of years that interlocate time and space, season and reason. Yet, as our kaumātua said, at our very core we retain our intimacy within our DNA coding. Ngā taonga tuku iho, God-given gifts that have enabled us to survive throughout the millennia. Of course, we want to share that knowledge. We have it. Why would we want to keep it to ourselves? The tā Pākehā ki au, he marina. I'm a blend of all that. One is not more important than the other. What part am I going to split out? So these processes haven't worked for us. And, I could go on about now we've got a new landlord in town, unfortunately. It's the treaty settlement entities. So I'm going to put it right out there. So people, please, the knowledge holders are at place. The people of this marae know everything you heard yesterday and more. And so I'm a very, really, really big fan of bringing in the lived experience in, on and around our sacred waters and lands. That experience cannot be compared. It's not a notional thing. You can't learn it in a book. It can't be hypothesised about. Either you've learnt it, lived it, or you haven't. Simple as that. And we're talking about the source to the sea and all the aquifers, and so it goes on. So, ka nui te mihi atu whānau kua taimai, ki te kaunihira, ki ngā kaimahi,
To the families who have gathered here today, the
and
councillors,
wouldn't we love
and
to
all
have
the
had the
staff who have
resourcing
gathered here
that
today.
our treaty partner has experienced? And we would, I can't imagine what it'd feel like. Just amazing. We might even have holidays occasionally, So we present to you our finest within the constraints of this timeline. There will be some of the whānau speaking later on in the process, week 3.
Hey, thank you very much. Appreciate that we've got time constraints and you've got a lot of speakers, and I hope that you appreciate that we've given everyone
Sure.
the opportunity to have their say, so I really appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right. So, any singers amongst us? Right, I do other things.
Thank you.
Our next submitter is Te Tai Whenua Here Taunga. And, sorry, my apologies, Ngāti Pōporo Koro Ngāta Marae. Sorry for that. Laura Kamo.
No.
Oh, Laura. My apologies, we've got Ngāti Pōporo Koro Ngāta Marae.
We'll hear what Laura has to say.
Kia ora.
Tiramarama ngā whetū ki te rangi, kia rere noa te puhihi o hikawera, kia whiti noa i o mangaroa, e noho ana ki korongota. Raukawa ngā tarawa atareta, mangaroa te awa o te atua, e noho ana ki korongota. Tēnā rā koutou katoa.
Greetings to
We're
all.
sitting on Te Ara o Korongota as it traverses this way from Te Whanawhana. As our awa sits upon Te Mangaro, and it brings with it our everlasting life, and it feeds Te Awa o Te Atua from the Paritua, ka rewarewa. It sustains my people i roto i tēnei wāhi, Korongota. Waiaroha is the premise of the submission that my marae submitted to you. I've assumed that you have read our submission. Ka pai. Then I don't need to take an academic journey with you. But for our Waira whānau, our submission looked at the environmental impacts and the well-being of our hapu as a result of these resource consents of our awa and our sources. The lack of kaitiakitanga that we've been able to exercise since 1960. The lack of acknowledgement from the Hawke's Bay Regional Council who cut us out of our decision-making process. Just like our tipuna, Hiniaka, when she went to go sign Te Tiriti o Waitangi, nō Ngāti Pōporo ia, she also got cut out. Today is not the day.
She was from Ngāti
Today,
Pōporo also.
we submit to be included in the management of our awa. Today, we have no river flow, and our whānau e Mangaro shared those, the most direct thoughts with you yesterday. The continued water taking has impacted on my community for over 100 years. Since the Borough Council decided to change the name of our road, our name, Te Awa o Te Atua, needs to be restored because we have all lost sight of the significance of this rohe. Te Awa o Te Atua, the sustaining life, the inner workings of our wahine to provide fruit, to provide nourishment for our people, to provide water that my hapu, our hapu, has drawn upon for over 500 years. We have been locked out since 1960. We were pushed off our papakainga, made to move elsewhere because we have not been a part of the decision-making processes that this council has made for us. Did you make it for us? Kau. Marae Kakoho seems to benefit, hence the renaming of our road to Marae Kakoho. The name of our whenua, Te Awa o Te Atua, is significant enough to tell you how significant we are to the water resource and the vitality of this rohe. The day the council ruled to take away our ingoa was the day the degradation of our mana occurred. This will not occur in my generation. The tipuna that stands on that whare over there, I am number 8 generation. My mokopuna, he is number 10. We will not let this come about no more. This is an passionate plea to say, restore our awa. Restore Te Awa o Te Atua. Give us our place names back. When my people stood upon the far side upon Kuru Papango and looked over to Te Mata, Te Tipuna, they saw the twinkling of the whenua. So they layered our celestial whakapapa into our terrestrial whakapapa. Because Māori have a self-validating loop that ties us to the atua, to the whenua, to everything that runs underneath. Te Awa o Te Atua. My great-grandparents fished in that awa, but actually they first fished on the karukaru. Where is the karukaru? Cut off again, cut off our food supply again 100 years ago. Now it's called the Iron Gate Stream. That river used to traverse through my property. We used to see the green of that awa in my property. Now all we see is the alluvial sands. When my whānau and I moved back to here, we were told we weren't able to build on our whenua. We were told that the aquifer was 1.5 metres deep. We sunk a well 10 years ago and we had to go 10 metres. Where's that water gone? It's been over-allocated. But if you look at our pictures here, there's lots of green spaces around my community. There's no green space in my community. This is an impassionate plea to say, where is our awa? Where is our water? My nephew and his friends went to go eeling. They found over 100 juvenile inganga swimming around in the mud looking for water. Where's the childhood they deserve? Where is their childhood? Where's their memories? Where's the manaakitanga? Where is their whanaungatanga? I submit to you, because of the over-allocation of our tipuna, we can't pass this whakapapa and knowledge that I hold to our children because we've got no examples to show them. We've got no river plains to say our awa went through there and our tipuna fish kokupu up there. Where's that? So today, we are presenting to you on behalf of our hapu Ngāti Poporoa Korongatā Marae. It will be organised as follows. My passionate plea to you. Where is our right at the decision-making table for this community? Followed by Geraldine, who will tell us the stories of our whenua as we grew up, raised in this whenua. Followed by my cousin Kevin Tamati, who has a slightly longer memory, and he will also share with us his kōrero. And I will round us off in saying, this is what we submit for. Kia ora te whānau.
Kia ora.
Tēnā tātou katoa. My grandparents are Hemi and Rose Pudiri, and my parents are Monty and Stephanie Cowan. Like my cousin here and our uncle Kevin, we're all Pākids, and this is where we grew up. And I just want to share 2 examples of what it was like living in the Pā. I'm a teacher by profession, and I worked up at Bridge Pā School, which is a minute walk up that way. Looking at these pictures here, back in 2006, when every year we used to gear up for the drought, and I'm not talking about a drought that you would hear about on the news, I'm talking about the drought in our taps. And we'll run out of water every year. So one of our uncles, Uncle Stu, his sister sits on, where is she? Whaia Rewan, over here on my left. He came down to school one day with these big, huge containers. And the Uncle Stuart is no stranger to our school. He has 10 children and many, many mokopuna. And through all the children's excitement, we stopped everything that we were doing. And all the classes came out to Uncle Stu. And to our horror, he had just been down to our creek, just outside here. And full were eel. And the eel couldn't go anywhere. They were sitting right underneath the bridge. So he made an attempt to save them. And he taught our children manaakitanga that day. And not only that, but also kaitiakitanga. As a school, we changed our whole curriculum around our eels. And what a rich program that we were able to teach our children that day for the rest of the term. And the connection that it brought with one of our dads, who was a hunter and a gatherer. He is no longer able to share a lot of his practices that were passed down to him through his parents, through his grandparents, to his children, not in the same way. That's example number 1. Growing up as a child across the road here, when the creek was raging, my cousins and I, my friends, being Pā kids, everyone's a cousin, we don't know how, and it doesn't matter. This is our connections growing up as a whānau. We would every day find our water spot, and that's where we would spend the day. And we could pick and choose which waterhole that we wanted to jump in for that afternoon. One of my friend's mum is here today. And this was our life growing up in Bridge Pā as a Pā kid. What did that do for us? It taught us whanaungatanga. It taught us how to take care of each other. And it was our well-being as high school and primary age children and teenagers. This is where we hung out. This is what our life was about, being a Pā kid. When my children, they were also Pā kids. The river wasn't as raging. The duckweed was growing. They weren't able to swim across the road. They were then subjected to where the bridge was. So the bridge became their haora, their well-being, where they'll meet with all the Pā kids and they'll do the high, and for them it was all about doing bombs. But about doing the bombs was making those whānau connections, which is what is really important for any Pā kid that grows up throughout Aotearoa. Now, my mokopuna, he attends Mangaro Kohangareo right next door. He was here earlier. It's his nap time now, so he wasn't able to be here to share his experience. The picture that you see over there on the wall, that's his reality. This is what it is. If we don't stop the current practices that are happening today, right now, he's going to be catching nothing but flies. And that may seem a bit funny, but that is his reality. Our children are locked in their homes on devices. The internet rules their world. However, when summertime goes and there's enough water in there to jump off the bridge, that's where they are. Imagine if they could do that year-long round as we did when we were children. In my mother's time, she was also a pā kid. That was their food source. And I remember stories of her being baptised as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints right behind our marae in Korongata. My son baptised Laura's nephew there. We had to wait. We had to wait till we knew when there was water before he could be baptised. That's our wairuatanga, being delayed. However, that was a practice that we wanted to carry on, bring our baptisms back to our awa. There's many, many more, but what I have said, those are the strongest memories that I have, that I hope that our mokopuna will have. And as a nanny, you know, there's only one thing that's the most important thing in this world, and that is our mokopuna. And we here, there's lots of nannies in here, and we stand fearless. We'll knock down any barrier that will give our mokopuna the opportunity to thrive. Not only just to survive, but thrive. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa.
Thank you.
So thank you all.
Someone's going to get it.
Taking donations.
Oh, yeah. Kia ora. Ko raukaua te maunga, ko
I affiliate
karerewa,
with this
ka
mountain.
rewa rewa te awa,
I
ko
affiliate with
Ngāti
these
Kahungunu
rivers.
te iwi, ko Ngāti
I
Pōporo te
affiliate
hapu,
with this tribe and
ko
these
Korongata te
sub-tribes.
marae.
This marae.
My mother is Regan Tamati, and my father is Ngāra Reko Sandy Tamati. My mother hails from here, and my father is Taranaki. I'm Kevin Ronald Tamati. I'm the third child of a family of 12. And I guess where I start is we lived 3 doors down the road on the right. So that was our home. When we were kids, I remember this place being flooded out. In the 70s, the floods were that bad that Mangaro wasn't here, the marae wasn't here, but from the bottom of the hills right down the valley was just covered in water. It was great for us. We couldn't go to school. But that was the damage that this place had to persevere and experience. And then eventually, as time moved on, the marae was built and we lost our water. So whilst the flood was, I guess, the commencement of us losing the water, we still battled with trying to protect the During the summer, when the creek had dried up, as everybody has said so far, you'd get all the ponds, and pretty much in all the ponds, all the way up to Glazebrookes, all the way up to Wasprel, and back down to Pakipak, there were different areas that sustained water ponds, and it depended on that side of the road. On the west side of the road, there is no trees or no undergrowth, so all of those paddocks on that side, the water didn't last long. But down here, towards all the way back down to Pakipak, there were ponds that were loaded with eel and carp. Loaded with, when the water was flowing, there was watercress, there was carp and fish, along with eels in the Awa. So, what did we used to do? Me and my reprobate cousins or mates used to go eeling. The eeling depended on what time of the year it was and whether there was water. And if there was water, then we would go eeling at night. And at night time we couldn't afford batteries and torches. Those were for other people, wasn't for us. So our torches were car tyres cut in quarters or truck tyres cut in quarters, and then every 100 metres up or down the river, we'd make these things into a torch. So we'd get a log of wood or a stick of wood, nail the tyre, the quarter tyre, onto the stick of wood, and as we went up the river, up the creek, we'd drop a torch every 50, maybe 60 metres. And by the time we got up to the top, we'd turn around, light the first torch, and the light from the torch from the car tyre would light up the whole width of the creek. So we used to catch our eels like that. We had a gaff and we had a sack. And depending on how we felt, whether we were energetic, would determine how far up we would go, or we would finish here at the bridge. Believe it or not, there is a bridge out there. It's got no water in it, but that's where we would finish. So all the way down from a long way up the creek, it was about fun. It was getting kai, but it was having the fun of chasing these eels all over the creek. So we'd come home and we'd have a half a sack or a sack full, depending on how fruitful our fun was, and then we'd just split the bag of eels up. During the day, if we needed to, we'd go back down this way, back down to Pakipak. Going down to Pakipak, there's a whole lot of trees on there, so there was a lot of ponds and a lot of protection. And so eels and fish we could catch down this end of the river. So depending on what sort of day it was or what sort of night it was, we would go on that side of the road and make our way down here. And if we were going out during the day, we would go down this end, because the trees, the foliage that was growing down this side covered the river. We did. One of our cousins ended up dying down this end of the river. So we have had some, or a death in my time. He wasn't even supposed to be here. He came from Roy's Hill. he lived in a family over there, but unfortunately he came down here and went to the river over the fence or past the Kurangata Marae, and he was fishing down there, and apparently he had an attack, asthmatic or some sort of a attack, and he fell in the water and drowned and died. I think it was a week later when he was reported missing that they found him. And it was only because some of the relations were kneeling and came across the body floating on the river. So for me, there is a lot of different memories of how fruitful the river was and how much fun we used to have in it, because jump over here in the bridge, used to have the bridge, the road goes over the bridge, okay? And then on the left side, on the far side of the bridge, was the shallow end. That's where all the little babies went, all the children who couldn't swim. And on this side is the deep end. And that's where all those who could swim used to play around and used to treat it as our aquatic centre. Until they built the swimming pool at Frimley. And then from Frimley, all of our whānau would go across over there and swim over at Frimley, the pond at Frimley. So that really decimated the use of our pools here. And I guess unless you fell into the creek, that was the only time it ever really got used to swim in. But as far as kai is concerned, there were always eels in it. Depending on the time of day, the light, if you needed during the day down this end, all the way to Pakipak, was the dark areas and the dark ponds. On that side of the river, you would go out at night, or we would go out at night, because there was no trees, there was no nothing to stop the flames of our very expensive torches to go up there and damage any of the Glazebrook's trees. Directly behind Kurangata, if you have a look out here, the river or the creek, over the years of its flowing out, the back of the marae was absolutely damaged with water, and over the years, just the passage of the river over the years just made the whole back of the Kurangata Marae a swamp area, a dry swamp area. So in the 80s, might have been the 90s, it was filled. And I don't know whether it was true, but the filling came from building sites, and what I'm told was dumped in there because in 2004, when I came back from the UK, I sat in as the chairman of trustees at Kurangata Marae, and was told that it was landfill from building sites that was dumped in the back, and we need to get that tested to make sure that there is no asbestos in there. At the moment, behind Konongata Marae, we've got a big 5 or 6 acre paddock that's pretty flat, pretty good, and it goes down to the creek as it flows past. Oh, well, in this case, as it's directing there's no water in it, so it doesn't flow. But over the years, when it was filled, it went from a different site. Prior to it being filled, 10 metres maybe away from the marae, from the cookhouse, from the whare, was straight into a bog or straight into some ugly growth, trees, willows, poplars, all sorts of things were down there. And then when it got cleaned out, that's when I'm told it was filled with rubbish from yards, from building sites, from anywhere they could dump rubbish, or wherever they wanted to dump rubbish or clear rubbish. It came down here. In my time, I guess in 2004 when I got back as the chairman of the trust at Konongata, we had a lot of concerns and we just didn't know whether that's, and we haven't even had it tested yet. You know, I don't think, we've had it tested anyway. Have you had it tested? No. So we don't know at this stage whether that rubbish that was dumped down there is good, clean building stuff or real good, clean building stuff. We don't know what it is. We've got a lovely playing turf there, but I wouldn't advocate playing rugby league on it because we don't know what's in it. I think that's all I have, and for me, living here, growing here, being part of the community, we had some kids who had no ears. I wouldn't say I was one of them, but at stages during when we were in, because Glazebrook's paddocks went all the way back to Washpool, that way. And when we used to go up the river and do our eeling and having fun up there, on the odd occasion he'd come out and he'd say, "Get out of my paddock." And I guess it wasn't because I was the biggest, it was just because I didn't give a shit what he said, what he thought. I said, "This ain't your paddock, this is our paddock." And he said, "I'll kick your ass." And I said, "No, you won't, because I've got an uncle in the police force that'll get rid of you." So, you know, we, cheeky little bugger from Bridgebar. I guess that for me was the reality of our situation as far as water was concerned. Our whare that we were in, we ran out of water. So we had to ring the pump specialists, and the water well had to be, or the pipes had to go down another 10 metres. And that was, crikey, we were still in the house and I was still here, so that would have been in the 80s, maybe early 90s. And I know that there were other whānau down there whose wells weren't as deep as the one that we had extended it to. So they then started having problems with water. And I really don't know what the fuss is about, you know. We don't need water. We're only Māori. Māori don't drink water. Yeah, that's one of the worst sides of my nature is I'm really sarcastic. I better not ask that question.
Well, thank you, Mr. Tamati, for sharing. We really appreciate you sharing some of your childhood memories because it's helpful for us with the context, because obviously we're not from here. Well, Roger is, but it's good to hear the context of how you've grown up and the changes that you have observed. So that's really important to us. And there's some concluding comments from you.
Tora tātou anō. So just some concluding comments from our hapu Ngāti Poporo in our marae Korongata. We seek a Ngāti Poporo hapu management plan as it concerns our awa and te awa o te atua. We are seeing a restoration of te awa o te atua so that we don't have to drill down so far to access and draw our water. We would like to be resourced by yourselves to monitor our water flow, resource to restore the banks, resource to work with the farmers and the wine growers in ensuring a continued flow of water 24/7, 365, forever, amen. Ngāti Poporo to be informed of water levels from Te Whanawhana to Pakipaki. Investigate wetland restoration, because I believe that's part of the solution. We need to help us investigate the impacts that a wetland could have on our community and how we achieve these improvements. When you have a damaged artery through a community, your heart doesn't beat. And this is certainly the case in my community. Our heart's not beating because we have not got those opportunities for whakawhanaungatanga, for kaitiakitanga, for rangatiratanga, for our pūrākau, for our whakapapa. When an artery through your community dries, our community does indeed die, and we resort back into our homes, into the nuclear family that we were told to have in 1960. We are a whānau whānui, as you hear. We go back and whakapapa to each other over 10 generations. Look at the opportunities we are missing out because our artery is dry. Therefore, our oral submission outlines the flow of our awa and the state of our waterways, the continued pressure and right to manage our awa, our water to restore te awa o te atua. Our hapu development plan we propose to partner with the council directly is to restore te awa o te atua. Ngā mihi nunui kia koutou katoa, and I thank my Ngāti Poporo whānau for being
The biggest
here.
acknowledgement
And
to
our
all of you
neighbouring whānau,
here.
to our Mihiro whānau, to our Omahu whānau, kia ora koutou katoa, our Ruahapia,
Thank
our
you all.
Kaiwhenua, Hiratanga Tamatea. We support the applications. We support the work of Ngāti Kahungunu Iwi Incorporated with Ngaio and Shade. We support the work of Mare Apatu as he worked with our hapu representative, Joella Brown. We submit her apology today. You will notice that every submitter will submit an apology on behalf of Joella Brown. She is a vocal hapu member. Forever amen, whether it be in black and white or in our manawa. Kia ora.
Thank you.
Pene pene te kura,
Ho te kura, whanake te kura e raro ia warua, ko te kura nui, ko te kura roa, ko te kura o tawhitina tu hai po, tēnei te tira ho te tūmata kuru, ki te tara o ngā onga, ngā tai ora e ngā hau e kupe i waiho i te ao nei. Riki ake kake ake i te tohua rewa, te ara o tā whaki, i piki ai ki runga, i roko hina atura, mai kuku makaka, hawai o maui, he waha i pā mai, taku wahine purotu, taku tāne purotu, orua ko te tau e.
Kia ora, thank you for your presentation.
Kia ora.
We next have Te Tai Whenua Here Taunga, Mariu Black and Mare Apatu. Maury. Mariu. So we've read the submission, and thank you also for the evidence that you've provided. We've had an opportunity to read through those, and we will have some questions in regards to aspects of it, unless you already cover them during your presentation.
Sure thing. Tēnā koutou e tō mātou matu i te rangi. A tāne nui a rangi tāne whakaperiperi whakarongo mai. Nau I wehi a ngā matua, nau ko te ao, nau ko te pō. Nau I te ki te mātauranga, nau ko te wānanga nei. Nau I pupuri ta hauora, nau ko te tangata. Nau I a hau, e rongo tūturua whakamaua kia tīna. Haumie hui e. Te wai ora wai rā tahi, rongo mai tūwaha. A Māori ora ki te rangi, te wai ora wai rā tahi, rongo mai tūwaha, Māori ora ki te whenua. Ko here taunga hauku nui ārarau, hāro te kahutako tono ringa hora. Te hauku nui a ngā mokopuna, ngā ararau o ngā rangatahi, te hāro o te kahu, o ngā kaumātua, te whenua takoto no, o ngā tīpuna, te manamoto hake o ngā whānau,
the independence of the families, the tribes, the sub-tribes of Ngāti Kahumunu ki here taunga bind together.
No reira, mai te timatanga te rangi nei, ina nahi rā
From the beginning of today and yesterday, I'd like to thank you, Cauldron, for starting with our karakia.
Ko koutou ngā kai kumi
And to
hana,
you, the commissioners
mātou
that are
I
before
tēnei wā,
us at this time,
ko koutou rā ngā kai kaunihera, I roto I te whare e tū nei,
and you all, the
mai o ko
councillors
koutou rā, tēnei
in
te
this
mihi atu,
house,
mai ki
I
a
acknowledge you
mātou,
all
te
from
kanohi o
us,
te tai whenua here taunga.
the faces of the Tai Whenua.
Mr. Chairman of this committee, Antoine, ngā mihi atu kia koe.
Thank you,
How,
Antoine.
as you've just referenced, you've already received our submissions and the expert evidence. And what I propose we will do to continue on, I first of all want to acknowledge, first and foremost, have the chairperson of Te Tai Whenua Here Taunga with us today, and that
and also to just acknowledge the fact that we have got my colleague Maury Black, who will also be providing supplementary matters to our submissions. And so what may help is that we will be going through that part of his amended matters that he's going to provide on top of our extensive submissions. I'm also aware that I've added my own personal submission, which will also follow. So if you would like, we can then have questions, welcome questions, right at the very end. Kupai?
I'm getting some nods, so that's a yes.
Right, yeah. Oh, my.
Thank you.
First and foremost, I just want to make this tribal identity that's embodied in each and every one of us that from Whakapapa into Heretaunga. As it was referenced yesterday quite eloquently insofar as our relationship to the well-being of Atua, the well-being that has to come with us demonstrating our rangatiratanga, the well-being that's demonstrated through our ability to demonstrate manaaki. I guess Heretaunga Hauku Nui, Heretaunga of the life-giving waters, Ararau of the many Arcadian pathways, Haro Te Kahu, whose beauty can only be seen through the eyes of the hawk Te Kahu, Heretaunga Takotono, which is left to us the humble servants, and of course Heretaunga Ringahora, with open hands of welcome tēnei te mihi atu. In brief, I would just like to start with these two comments and having to hand over to my colleague Maury Black. As my waters of Te Wairātahi spring forth through ngā pai maunga o Ruahine, Te Atua Mahara, Kai Manawa, Kāweka, o Hene Tūpari Maunga, to enter the veins of Tangaroa spilling into the tributaries below and above Papatūānuku. The rendition that I show before you in terms of this slide depicts that whole relationship. Ko waio, who am I? No waio, where do my waters come from? And ma waira, who am I doing this for? And I think that whole rendition is in relation to ensuring that the relation of the celestial heavens, the kauwairunga, down to the kauwairaro, is an extension of the well-being of te ira tangata. Nō reira, the Muriwai Hau Hauku Nui, the life-giving aquifers ki uta ki tai, from the mountains to the sea, moving energy from our maunga through ngā ngaru o ngā upoko oro, te awa o te atua, ngaru roro moko, tuararo ki rangatira, the entire name that we make reference to, the ngaru roro awa. I also want to state that there are different definitions that council may think of in terms of categorising their understanding of definitions. And I just want to add in this context that we've heard from our whānau yesterday in regards to their whakaaro aroha of this awa ko Paritu and ka rewa, and they made reference to repo. And I just wanted to be clear that their understanding and definition may be at loggerheads or difference to those within council in applying definitions insofar as what is a creek and what is a nawa. So I just wanted to highlight that point. I'm now going to come over to you, Mr. Maury Black, and I will continue on this particular theme with my own personal submission. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora
tātou, ngā mihi kia koutou. I'll just to summarise a couple of things before I start on this is that I was brought up on the Paritua when I was younger. My dad was a roadman out at Rokawa. We lived at the bottom of Torren Hill in the roadman's cottage. I fell asleep to the sound of the Paritua over the paddock. And then later on, I think they got paid fortnightly on the county council. My dad was, he'd go to town some Fridays. Once in a while, one occasion he hit the bridge on the way home, out Rokawa Road. A guy Lyons picked us up and took us home. I note that he is now taking, or the family's taking quite a bit of water to irrigate paddocks up the road here. Anyway, I also, my brother married into the Pere family here back in the 70s. I'll leave it there. So the Tai Whenua submission addresses numerous issues, not just out here but across the whole of the tank catchments. The summary here is mostly the key issues that were raised in the submission. PC9 drafting not giving effect to higher order planning documents. Cultural values, including whakapapa o te wai, not given the respect that those values deserve. In this respect, I think that the whakapapa has been fractured. Where you get the groundwater dragging out the surface water and eventually creating that separation that then disconnects the surface water and the groundwater. And I note in some of the reports that the separation is a number of metres. So eventually like to see that restored, that connection restored. Economics and water demand given a priority above sustainable management as prescribed in Section 5 of the Act. The enabling through the tank plan change for the continuation of unsustainable practices without addressing their adverse effects. Plan change 9, not providing a clear pathway and trajectory towards avoiding or mitigating environmental effects from water abstraction and land use. And then the objectives and policies in Plan Change 9 placing an over-reliance on further meetings, collaboration and input from community, industry, catchment groups, and another plan change that is to come shortly. So after like almost 10 years of collaborating and working with council, now proposing to do more of the same. It's like, when do we get to the end and get a plan that is amenable to all? Plan change not providing for Te Mana o Te Wai and its foundation principles, and I acknowledge Kerry's comments yesterday around the timing for that and the notification of the plan change prior to the NPS 2020 coming out. Not recognising and providing for the relationships of Māori with their ancestral lands, waters, sites, wahi tapu and taonga, nor the active protection of the same. And that's a direct reference to a Section 6E, I guess, and the other one is one of the treaty principles that are already contained within the regional plan, that don't seem to gain much credence through decision making. Plan Change 9, not applying the precautionary principle to the management of water quantity and water quality in the presence of uncertainty and doubt. And then one of the key things that we've noticed is that the accounting for stream depletion effects from Zone 2 groundwater takes on surface water, they're not actually taken into account. There is an overall consideration of grouping them all together and acknowledging that they do have an adverse effect, but there's nothing happening around these multiple consents to address the effects that they cause. Then there's the freshwater management units. I see there's a disconnect between the NPS and its direction around FMUs, whereas at the moment Plan Change 9 doesn't include them, and I acknowledge that this is an issue that's going to be looked at further, but then it means probably a planning conference or something to see how we can work back into that process, given that, as one of the whānau mentioned before, that everyone else has another 2 or 3 weeks to look over the Section 42As and the addendum reports and other things. And that meeting, I think it's referred to coming up in July, where the council's looking at an overall approach to FMUs or a regional approach. So we sort of, there's a little bit of a concern around how these, we're in a hearing process now, but we have to wait for other things to happen before we decide. Reliance on the actual and reasonable test, I don't like this term at all. It doesn't actually prescribe anything to do with sustainable management. It's more around water demand and extending the current activities or the current over-abstraction that causes the decline in our surface water and groundwater. While I'm on that, I'd just like to also mention that the actual and reasonable test, it's not based on any sort of sciencing, it's just based on the status quo and perpetuating the status quo. Therefore, you're perpetuating the adverse effects from the status quo and then rolling over consents for another 10 years after the plan becomes operative, if it ever does. It's like saying, well, we'll just ignore the effects for another 10 years. To me, that's not how sustainable management should work. Getting on to other whānau and iwi submissions, we've worked quite closely with Ngāti Kahungunu through the whole planning process with TANK. I absconded from the TANK process, I don't know, about 3 or 4 years in. I just sort of had enough of it. I'm supportive of the amended version of Plan Change 9 provided to this hearing by Nikki's planning expert. Except for the rules, I think the rules need a bit more. You need to get the front end right before you can get the back end right. I don't see it beneficial as changing the rules now or amending them until all of the objectives and policies and schedules are sorted out. Where we differ there's just a few things that we differ on. One of them is, what do we do about the flow in the Paritua? We do have a bit of, it's not a commercial interest, but an interest in the Paritua through the Tai Whenua holds a consent that we have. We were using it to keep water in the awa in the Ngāra-Roro. So when they closed down the artificial recharge at Roy's Hill, I said to Mare, get some of that water. I think we got 400 litres a second. The water at the time, it didn't have any restrictions on it until the river dropped below the 5,000 litres per second mark. After that, we were required to stop taking the water. We saw the best benefit for the water to be left in the awa at the time. Council also had a policy at the time around use it or lose it. That required, because we were just leaving it in the awa and we weren't actually using it, we then had to decide how can we get around this use it or lose it policy. It was then went to a hearing and we transferred the water to Mike Glazebrook because he had, when you take water out of a river, you have to measure it. The Tai Whenua didn't have a measuring or abstraction process set up at the time. The idea was to give it to Mike Glazebrook and tell him to put it down the Karewarewa. I didn't handle this process, it was handled by an external contractor, and when it went through the council, it went from being a 400 litres per second water take restricted only by the 5,000 litre per second level in the river. It then went to a quantity, it got converted into a quantity. So the quantity, I think from memory, was somewhere around 90,000 cubic metres. And if you use it up 400 litres per second, it gets used up quite rapidly in about 2 or 3 weeks, I think. So therefore, the benefit that excuse me, the benefit that we had envisaged for Bridge Pa and the Karewarewa would only last for 3 weeks because of that volumetric limit being put on. There were other elements to the Cunning plan. One of them was to, once through another process like the tank plan, we did get augmentation going for the Karewarewa through another mechanism. We could then take this water out further down and hopefully benefit Korongata or Mangaro Marae in some sort of environmental development, wetland development. It was a bit of pie in the sky about it. It was just scrambling around really to try, and we didn't want to lose the water, I guess. So that's where we differ over the Niki submissions and their version of the Plan Change 9 or their track changes version. We also look for tighter seasonal and quantity restrictions on groundwater and surface water abstraction. And like I said before, we haven't really addressed any of the specific rules other than a couple in my evidence in chief. If I could ask the IT person I'd like to go over a couple of schedules, if I may, just briefly, just to highlight Appendix 5 and Appendix 8 to my evidence, just to give an example of some of the depletion that's happening around Hawke's Bay. So do I have the ability to turn that out, or can you do it? Oh, you can do it, yeah. Okay, so this slide here is about, I think it's around 2008 year. So this is Council's own data. This is sort of just after the start of the irrigation season. Go around. And then as it rolls on, January, you see these red dots. So this is, back then, the red dots are the wells where the aquifer has reached the lowest level that it has ever reached for that particular month over the whole monitoring period of record period. So back then, those red dots are sort of the danger points in terms of abstraction from the aquifer. And then we go on to February, there's a lot of red dots on there, so lowest ever recorded up to that time. And then if we just go over about every 5 seconds, it would be good. And as you note, coming up, here's a few years later, 2015, and eventually what you see is that periodically these things, red dots, just keep coming up all of the time. So to me, that is saying that the aquifer is being mined. And this is the key reason why some of our surface waters are also getting bans for longer and longer periods. And I note in 2012, 2013, the ban on the Karamu was 126 days. So you're talking about from a 6-month irrigation season, the river's on ban for 4 months, which isn't very profitable for anyone, and it's not very, very good for the aquifer either. So I understand the wish to manage both the aquifer and the surface water together, but I think it should be more aimed towards the health of both, so that that whakapapa connection between them is restored and then remains intact. And if I can, is that up to 2020? So we're getting up to, this is just last year, and then the latest one is 2021, and again, lowest ever recorded levels. And then the yellow ones are below normal. And I was just thinking yesterday when the whānau were talking about the kids, and today as well, unable to swim in the awa. And so it's like a new normal. The normal is changing. I remember what was I doing? I was mucking around in Aussie shearing and stuff in Longreach, out the back of Longreach at one time, and there was a kid there, he was 4.5 years old, and it started raining and he freaked out. He'd never seen rain. And then I thought about the tamariki here and the rangatahi trying to swim in their awa, and there's no water there. So there's that connection, that break in your whole psyche. Yeah. If I may, can I get on to the other, I think it's Appendix 8. Yeah, all right, so Council keeps records of the low flows and when to instigate or implement bans. We have here a record. I just note that for a couple of them, some of them were measured on the 23rd, and then some of them were measured, the last time they measured on the 17th. So, and some of those streams are like 1 litre a second above the minimum flow, and they've remained 1 litre per second, 1 litre above the minimum flow for 5 days, 7 days, something like that. And so here's a couple of days later, you can see that definitely I don't know if it's remained there, it just hasn't been measured again like the ones above it, where it's been measured on the 25th for some of them, and I understand that there's telemetries going there, so there's a problem with the compliance. And if we can go on to, so here we see the Karamu. The minimum flow on the Karamu is 1100. If you look at the towards the left of your diagram around the 18th, you see where it's dropped below the minimum flow, and then goes up to the 24th, it's still below the minimum flow. But through this whole period, the irrigation ban wasn't implemented to stop people taking water from the Karamu. So if this level or minimum flow level is set to protect in-stream health, ecosystem health, protect aquatic habitat and things like that, and then these types of issues arise, well, to me it's like the provisions in the plan need to be a lot stronger, because at the moment they're not working. I think there's too much leniency. In fact, it's worse. Plan Change 9 is worse than upholding the status quo, because the allowance for an extra 10% take below minimum flow means that the health of the awa comes secondary to financial gain. So I'll leave it there. Open to any questions, if either on these things or whatever you'd like to address through my evidence in chief. Yeah. So kia ora.
I'm just wondering if we hear Mara and then ask some questions after that. Yeah, let's do that now. Yep, we'll ask some questions. So we want to start. Dr. Cowie.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. Just first in relation to paragraph 5 of your summary, where you talk about the Paratua. I do notice there is a allocation potentially available to be discharged into the Paratua of between 200 and 400 litres per second. Does that in any way satisfy your concerns about that?
I saw it. I see it as a temporary sort of thing until the groundwater levels are restored. Are restored back to so that the connection between the awa and the groundwater comes back again. And that was our eventual thing. We agreed to having a augmentation for the Paratua, but only for a period sort of short to mid-term, until all of the other consents have been wound back a bit, and then it manages to look after itself.
So my second question is that my overall, and we've heard lots of opposition to tank, but my overall impression of tank is that it is aiming to restore over a long term water quality, and it is aiming to restore water quantity, including preventing any more abstraction from the Hiratonga Plains aquifer. But both those things are going to projected to take a very long time. We're talking decades in the case of water quality, sort of 20 odd years. Would it be fair to say that, from your impression, if that throwing tank out isn't going to achieve a lot of those things, but it's the time frames in particular to restore water quality and to attempt to restore flows, for instance by increasing pressure in the aquifer, it's the very long time it's going to take that would be the hub of your concerns?
Partly, I guess it's connected to how long do you have to wait. I mean, it's the target in the tank plan is 2040.
That's for water quality, yes.
Yeah, for water quality it is, and then it's almost been used as a sort of a target for other things as well. You know, by 2040 we'll do this and we'll do that and we'll do that. Whoever's around in 2040, good luck to them. But these kids are growing up with, paru water now. And I think that's partly the difference between Western science paradigm and Mātauranga Māori. We don't sort of look at medians and averages and modelling. It's like, go and jump in the river, have a swim. You want to do it now. You don't want to have to say, oh, is it clean? Is it? If you try and make your children jump in a river when it's paru, they don't want to. And they shouldn't have to anyway. They should be able to swim in a clean awa. So having to wait for another 20 years, I mean, it's just too long.
So in relation to Te Mana Te Whai, it talks about first the health and well-being of water bodies and freshwater ecosystems, and then the health needs of people such as drinking water. And the third one is the ability of people and communities to provide for their social, economic and cultural well-being now and the future. So what you would be saying is that the environment takes priority and it's too slow to provide a sufficient level of environmental restoration. What I hear the council saying is we've stuffed it up, we've over-allocated, we've allowed water quality to deteriorate, and we're going to fix it in a very long time. Is that a fair impression of where you're coming from?
I think there's a contention between over-allocation and over-abstraction. If you look at the data, there's Niall's better at this stuff than me, he's a statistic guy, but I think it's around 160 million has been allocated, and they're going to wind it back to 90 or something from the groundwater. That's still not addressing the problem, because even as those State of the Environment monitoring reports showed, even when they're using 80, I saw Mr. Waldron's evidence before, or I read it online or somewhere, and it's about the different years. The 90 million was used back in 2012, 2013, but in other years it's only 80 million or 88 million. But even in those years, you're still getting mining of the aquifer occurring.
Yeah.
So from my point of view, 90 million's too high. And the time scale, I just think it's too long. I noticed there was some media release quite recently talking about noticeable improvement within 5 years. Is coming out of central government. So waiting for another 20 years, I think, is just postponing fixing the thing up. Leaving it to another generation. Yeah. How long do we have to wait?
Okay. Thank you for that.
Mr. Black, you've made quite a thing about Plan Change 9 not having referred to or used FMUs, and I think you're aware of the reasoning around the timing of Plan Change 9 process versus the implementation of the 2020 MPS for freshwater management. The question I have is, what do you think Plan Change 9 lacks as a result of not having FMUs specified in it?
It lacks prescription and management variables and parameters. We did a values and attributes report for the council. On the Ngāruaroa, we were looking at, and this was only on the Ngāruaroa, of course, we were looking at around 11 FMUs, and then the main stem being separate, and then down the bottom, because the 3 awa flow into one estuary, having that as a combined one. But hapu areas are usually at a sort of, in general terms, at a sub-catchment, more likely to be a sub-catchment scale. And I note that for water quantity, transfers, whether that's of a discharge right or a water permit to take water out. Under the FMU scenario, it's almost like they can happen within the same FMU, or they're easier to achieve those transfers within the same FMU. But if you've got a really large management unit like the Heretaunga water quantity area, say, that means you can transfer water anywhere within the whole of the Heretaunga. And to me, that's just too big. And if someone has got a right to discharge something in one hapu rohe, and then the guy who owns that discharge right, he can then transfer it to another hapu rohe. I mean, if we're looking at our cultural values, our manaaki, it's just not right for us to allow or to accept that paru to be transferred to somebody else. And that's what a large FMU does. Also, there's source apportionment. Where does the exceedance come from, whether it's a DIN thing, an ammonia thing, an E. coli thing? If you have a large FMU, you can't actually address the problem or the source of that problem, because it's just too big to quantify or to trace it back. Within a small, if you take, say, the Ohiwea, someone talked about the Ohiwea earlier, so there's a subcatchment for you. Everybody, the farmers in the whānau know everyone out there. The sharing gangs go and work for the farmers. They rub shoulders at the local, whatever they do, they go swimming together, they share contact and at sports and schools and things, so they know each other. You can work at that scale to manage your part of the awa as well, rather than working at a large one where you don't really know the guy from down the bottom of the river or up the top of the river. Yeah, so that's how I see it anyway. I think they have to be a lot smaller. I note that the Ruamahanga has quite a few FMUs on it. Yeah.
Thank you. I can understand where you're coming from now. And just one other question. Have you had a chance to look at the 42A reporting officer's addendum and revised changes to propose PC9?
I just finished going through the other one, and then a new one came out. I got halfway through it and then I fell asleep, sorry. But
all right, well, I was just going to ask you whether there's anything in that helped resolve some of your concerns with the plan.
Not really. I note in my evidence, I don't know, I forget what paragraph it was, but I was slagging the council around reneging on something. I think it was the 1,581 litres per second issue. It's sort of the cumulative rate of take from the Ngāra and then I'd only read through some of the section 42A, the original, the first one by that time, and then towards the end I noticed in the schedule that they dropped it to 1,300, so sorry about that, council. But it's just the changing nature of these things. There's so much material that you have to try and keep up with. Then
you don't need to tell us, though.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
That's all right. No, thank you.
Yep.
I had a question for you. This is at paragraph 133 of your evidence in chief, and you may not need to go to it specifically.
Holes in my memory.
It was just you made a statement around the Māori's mentioned 9 objectives and 2 policies.
Yep.
And your view was that there's a requirement to monitor the state of Māori and to assess the overall baseline state or subsequent states of Māori into the future. And I just wanted to pick your brains if you had a view regards, and I'm sure you do, about what that framework might look like.
We developed a Māori framework on the Toki. but that is sort of Toki specific. And the Tai Whenua developed that. We went through a whole process around that series of wānanga, what are the values that should be monitored, and we've developed the framework for there. We were looking into what is the transfer process, because in the lower Toki and parts of the Ngāra and the Karamu, some of the hapu are the same. And where they're not, it's what cultural process do you go through to transfer that across? You know, it's sort of like, okay, here's the tikanga and kawa that applies at this marae over that part of the awa or over that awa. But to move the framework across, what do you take out and leave over there, and what do you do to replace it when you're working in another awa? There's sort of planning support for it in terms of the RPS. I think it's in one of the objectives or policies from the RPS, where the adverse effects on Māori should be avoided or remedied or mitigated. But then if that Māori is not being quantified or assessed, well, it's very hard to then say this is what we're going to do to improve it, or this is what we need to do to restore it, things like that, because the connection is sort of broken between the RPS and the planning construct.
Yeah. Did you have a view about the scale in which a Māori framework might work best? Like
we did have a think around it. We thought more around monitoring takes a lot of time. It can be quite resource intensive. So we were looking at more in terms of hapu clusters, and that would enable both the learning process, and it can be an education process as well, and it helps to restore the kaitiaki and the wairua of the whānau as well. I noted when we had a couple of our wānanga down Ngā Whakatātara on the Toki, that there was people, whānau who had never been there. This is, this is a pā site right in the middle of the awa. And it's like it's not, the wairua is still there, but the people are somewhat disconnected from that wairua. And it's not just the perimeter of the island, it's how the ihi or the power emanates outwards into the awa from that. And how can you reconnect the whānau with that? And so we saw the Māori framework as partly a restoration of that aspect of connection as well.
Thank you. Roger, did you have any questions?
Kia ora, Murray. I was interested in your ideas, which you've made a statement in number 16 of your evidence about sub-catchment scale projects that allow local communities to take part in the care of their own awa. As we know, we get a lot of most of our evidence presented is on a grand scale. We're on the marae, we hear everything very local. And there seems to be a disconnect between all that evidence and what local people feel. So you made the suggestion there that it would be good to have sub-catchment plans where local marae and hapu could participate. Have you got any further thoughts on how that might be put into Plan Change 9?
Well, I saw the FMU as a mechanism to do that, the FMU scenario, and then that helps to connect not just the people, the whole community can connect to that. Ages ago, I'd sort of take the tamariki down the awa, you sort of capture or you generate interest from the whānau. Because, oh, what's my kid doing down there? Who's this fella taking my kid down the awa? And they come down for a look, then they see the state of the awa, then they get into the buzz of what we're trying to do, and it sort of grows from there. And I think that those catchment collective thing, I think that's a good idea, but it's just being able to, get the time and the resource to get them going. Also, I've noticed where sometimes I've been tried before, and there's like people don't gel. There's personality clashes and things like that. I guess, how do you open up that willingness and to enable? And I think sometimes it's maybe stop talking and listen a bit more. Yeah. I don't know if that answers your question. Sorry, did that cover some of it?
Yes, I'm just wondering whether we tend to get bogged down with committees and representation and miss the point about local people engaging with their local, with the why as it is in their backyard, and how that can be overcome.
Well, I think it's very difficult where there's the over-abstractions already occurring, because you're trying to influence someone's bottom line, their income, their well-being, their financial well-being, and then the value of their property as well. So if you take a bit of water off somebody, I've often said, I remember seeing a farm was 220 acres, and it was $1.1 million, and then with water on it, it was like 2.5 times that. So whereas a lot of farms progress and make money out of it, Māori don't seem to be in that space so much. Well done.
Kia ora, Maury. I want to pick up on your reference to the new normal that you referred to previously, because a lot of this conversation is around a new normal. And given the fact that you were on the tank group initially for 3.5 years, as I understand, I'm not really interested about why you came off it.
Yeah.
But my question is more about the ongoing development of Plan Change 9. I mean, you've given us a list, fairly good list of some things that you think ought to be given attention to.
Right.
But I reckon that goes beyond just your list. It touches on a lot of the things that people have been talking about with reference to the plan change, because a lot of people want changes. They might oppose, but they also want to amend. Yep. Say, well, we don't like it, but if we change this, we might get to like it, perhaps even. So I'm wondering that, with the new norm that you referred to was about the manifestation of some of the more sort of negative aspects of Plan Change 9, as I see it, over-allocation, abstraction, all those things. How do we change that? How do we deal with the degradation of water quality and stuff like that? And I'm wondering how the process can draw from all the various contributors, I think, to the conversation. I think you've highlighted a really important one, in that there's no one size that fits all, right? Locally, there may well be different things that apply to, say, what happens in Pakipaki or whatever. But my argument goes even beyond that, and it's talking to other people in the conversation. I think that the inclination is for people to just focus on the council, but there are a lot of other people in this conversation that need to be brought into our conversation. I think we need to be talking to them as well. And there have been references to some other local farmers here that I think, it seems to me anyway, that they might actually benefit for having a more comprehensive conversation with you, given the things that you've outlined here. Because I look at it and I think, how many other people are listening to Maury Black? How many other people can hear what he's saying here who ought to be? And so I think I'm making more of a statement than asking a question, but there's got to be an opening in there for a more extensive conversation that we don't seem to be having at the moment.
I think there's two elements to it, Ro. So with the tank thing, one of the things that brassed me off was not having a chairman and keeping order and listening to everybody and having a sort of a process in there whereby people could be heard and express their views. It was more like in tank it was often a PowerPoint. Any questions? 3 questions, time's up, on to the next PowerPoint. And it was like overloaded with PowerPoints. And also we were getting elements of these reports that had not yet been published. We were getting a scientist or a counsellor's view of the research before the research had actually been written up and published. And so it was difficult to interpret the raw data in our own way. And within Tank, it was sort of like a bit of a guinea pig process as well, because we had the VMO project was being run through it, the Values Monitoring and Outcomes project, involving NIWA, I think Landcare, Cawthron, and I think there's another one in there. And they were saying, oh, this is how you should think. You should use the Bayesian belief network. And I saw some of the whānau, what's this? What's a Bayesian belief network? So it was sort of like telling Māori how to think. We know how to think. You know, we go into wānanga all the time. We compare ideas, we blast each other, we love each other, the aroha still goes around and a bit of the raru as well, and we sort it out. We don't actually need to be told how to think. And there was that element in there. And that's sort of what brassed me off about it. It was, this is how you need to think so that you can come to this outcome and that, whoever Mr. Bayesian is, but it's those sorts of things. We know how to do that. We don't need to be told, but also it's even when people say something wrong or out of place, if they're being heard, they appreciate being heard and listened to, and then they're more likely to accept the process rather than, no, time's up, move on to the next thing. Yeah, so I still retained links through the tank after I left. I went over the plan with the planners, and I actually started up the Mana Whenua group right at the start, because I says, hey, you're going into a situation where you're going to get bombarded with all this stuff, and how do you maintain your cultural integrity through that? It had limited success, but we gave it a shot.
But that's one of the biggest challenges, isn't it? Just maintaining that objective view about where you come from, who you are, and all those sort of questions. Everybody's been talking about it all day today. And I think, again, I just get back to the point about the sort of wider conversation that needs to be had around this, because I go so far as to say it's a waste of time if you're only talking to yourself.
I think too, it's about respecting the mana of both, and so there's often a presumption, I guess, that Māori should accept the Western science paradigm, and I see it that I don't see it as a lot of the CRI stuff comes out and how do we integrate them? But I don't see it as an integration. I see it as both standing within their own mana and respecting each other's mana. And there's always that bit in the middle that where you rub up and there's a bit of friction and sometimes exciting things happen and sometimes they don't. But it's that narrow bit in the middle where we can join and interact, but we also need to see the Western science through our own interpretation. We need to run it through that Māori lens and say, okay, this is what you see with the MCI, but for Māori, we see it like this. I had a bit of a raru with my mate, well, not a raru, just a sort of a little bit of a debate. So Kate MacArthur is a freshwater ecologist, and she says, oh, okay, MCI, you do it over there in that riffle, and you measure your MCI, the bugs and things over there, because that's what the protocol or something says. And then I looked down at Ngā Whakatata where we were, all the kids were swimming over here. And I thought, well, shouldn't we measure it over here? That's where the contact is. But the thing is, they take it over. We went for a walk across the river where it was sort of swifter and had a riffle. But that's how it's done, I guess. So, but it's about how do you use those Western tools and adapt it to our own thing. Yeah. Sorry, I'm raving on too much.
Thank you, Mr. Black. We might just check on lunch. That's a thumbs up. Lunch is ready. So with your leave, Mr. Yep. Mare will have a break, and we will have a shorter lunch if we can be back here at 2 o'clock, and that will give you plenty of time. I don't want to shorten your evidence this afternoon. Back at 2. Thank you.